I'm Tom Bilyeu, the co-founder of Quest Nutrition and Impact Theory, and today on the Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Show, we talked about all kinds of stuff, but most importantly to me is belief system, mindset, and how much he hates the word authenticity. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to take a hard look at why follow your passion might be terrible advice, and we'll discover what will make a more powerful, more impactful way than simply following your passion. If you're a new listener, new viewer to the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, and we're honored and grateful to Inc.com, who made us the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Look, there are literally millions of podcasts out there. Thousands of them focused on leadership and business, but there's only one that focuses on the soul of leadership. And you're tuned into it. So we need your help. Remember, get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Do it now. If you don't, I'm going to set Tom Bilyeu on you. So terrible things could happen. Get on it. All right, let's dive right in and strip it right down. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, sales leader, entrepreneur leader, leader in any capacity, you know that today entrepreneurs are kind of the rock stars of the millennial generation. But you've heard me say so many times that I believe that entrepreneurship, business, and leadership are about something far greater than money. More important than becoming the next entrepreneurial unicorn. It's about purpose. And a successful business can, if you're in touch with your purpose, become a way for you to positively impact the world. Our guest today is Tom Bilyeu. Now, he's the co-founder of the 2014 Inc. 500 company Quest Nutrition. It was a unicorn startup valued at over $1 billion. He's the co-founder and host of Impact Theory. Tom's mission is the creation of empowering media-based IP for the acceleration of mission-based businesses. Tom is driven to help people develop the skills they need to improve themselves in the world, and his intent is in using commerce to address the dual pandemic of physical and mental malnourishment. Tom is regularly inspiring audiences of entrepreneurs, change makers, thought leaders at some of the most prestigious conferences and seminars around the world, including Abundance 360, A-Fest, and Freedom Fastlane. Tom has also been a guest on some crappy little show. What was his name? Some guy. Oh yeah, Tony Robbins. He's on Tony Robbins' podcast. He's been on the School of Greatness podcast, and he's been featured in Forbes, Inc., Success, and the Huffington Post. And he's currently on the innovation board at X Prize Foundation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Tom Bilyeu. And the crowd goes wild. Good to have you, Tom.
Good to be here, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I really appreciate you being on. Now, listen, I know you've done freaking thousands of interviews. I have too. We've been doing it for years. And I know that there are some really important things you like to talk about and want to get to talk about, and we'll definitely get to there. However, a lot of the things that you're asked on podcasts, the Tom Bilyeu fans have heard many, many times. And so I want to dive deep. Is that all right?
Oh, man, please. Take me somewhere new. I love that.
Good. So the first thing I want to do is kind of start off in the obvious and then go a little bit more. So we talked about the Quest Nutrition. It was this unicorn startup, blah, blah, blah. It's the stuff that landed you on the Tony Robbins podcast. But you didn't start out being a business builder, an entrepreneur. You started out with something that might in fact seem like the polar opposite of the path to success, which was your love of film. And you went to film school. How did your family feel about you tripping the light fantastic rather than getting yourself a good steady job?
I think that, my mom lived in a constant, and still does, quite frankly, live in a constant state of panic that I was going to do nothing with my life, or that I would be unhappy in some way. And so she worried, but very quietly. So when I was a kid, she was very encouraging, wanted me to go chase my dreams. And so I didn't grow up with that like pressure from my parents or anything. They wanted to see me happy. I was very passionate about filmmaking. They could see my excitement. They wanted to see me pursue it. So they were very encouraging about that. My dad, as I got towards graduation in film school, he sent me, starting at like month 6 or 5, I don't remember exactly, my senior year, it was 5 more months, 4 more months, 3 more months, 1 more month, to when he was not going to be helping me financially anymore. So literally the day I graduated, I had no more assistance from my family. So that was actually great. So from that perspective, he didn't have too many concerns because he just believed I would somehow figure it out. So that, a long story, but took me through my remedial jobs phase where, I was barely making ends meet, but I made some what ended up being quite smart decisions around. I managed apartment complexes and things like that, so I had really cheap rent.
So I was able that while you were in film school?
No, right after I graduated.
But again, there's that weirdness, right? It's like, hold on, you went to film school. You went to film school. I'm assuming you want to make films, and now you're managing apartments. It's a weird mix. I mean, we know people who go into the arts often wait tables. But you managed apartments. There must have been that entrepreneurial spirit in you as well, even during that film time.
It's interesting. There really wasn't. And I am, by nature, I am the world's worst entrepreneur. I don't have any real entrepreneurial instincts in me. So even the apartment managing thing was totally an accident. It was me capitalizing an opportunity that presented itself. And that, I will say, I've been good in my life about when an opportunity presents itself, I take that opportunity. But if that one hadn't fallen in my lap, then that it's terrifying to think what the outcome would have been. But so when I went to film school, I thought that I was showing real promise in film school, and I thought that I had natural talent for it. And that shows you my mindset. I was very focused on what comes naturally to me. Mm-hmm. And so I thought I was an innately gifted filmmaker. And so the first half of film school, I did very, very well. And then I got selected as one of the 4 people to direct a senior thesis film, which is a big deal. And so when it happened, it was like, oh my God, I'm like the chosen one. I'm literally one of 4 people chosen to, direct this thesis film. And I'm going to make this. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a 3-picture deal from Hollywood off the back of how good this film is going to be. And my life will be set. That's literally what I was thinking. And I showed up on the first day of filming with virtually no preparation. And to give you an idea, I wrote the script like to the minute that it was due. So a couple of hours before, I just like jot something down, which only feeds, and then it gets selected, which only feeds into, I'm just naturally good at this. So I roll up on set completely unprepared, and I fail miserably, very publicly, incredibly embarrassingly. And then that shakes my whole world and makes me realize that I am not a talented filmmaker. Like that was the hard realization that I had to face at that moment.
Let me stop you there for a minute, because how does that tell you you're not a natural filmmaker? Because what you just described was maybe you are a natural filmmaker and you just weren't prepared.
So this is when you're rolling up believing that you have instincts for something, and so you then rely on your instincts and realize that those instincts fail. So now you can set instincts. I don't have instincts as a filmmaker. Okay, so that's to the side. Then it's, well, if I don't have instincts, what exactly is natural talent? And by the way, I think that even instincts are trained, but I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
So I'm coming into this realizing if I have natural talent, I have no way to access it, because I certainly can't access it by intuitively making decisions. So I would go to set the camera up, or I would go to talk to the actors and realize I didn't know what to say to them. If their performance wasn't on the money right off the bounce, then I was paralyzed. I didn't know how to get them there. I would put the camera where it seemed cool, but it wouldn't add up to anything. So I had all these, like, the shot itself was kind of cool, but it didn't tell a story.
Right.
And so that was, you know, if I have an instinct for where to put the camera, what does that really matter if I don't understand how to tell that overarching narrative? And so what really locked this home for me was when I started teaching film after film school, I realized, okay, there are just things that I don't understand. Mm-hmm. So if I don't have that understanding intrinsically, can I gain that understanding? And it was through the process of teaching film to other people who also, by the way, were not naturally talented filmmakers, that as I went home and learned, I could come back and teach them what I learned, and then they could apply it, and it actually made their films better. And so seeing them taking the knowledge I was gaining, my ability to explain it, their ability to then execute on that, had such a profound and fundamental impact on the quality of the storytelling that I began to realize that it was a process, and that being naturally gifted maybe would have been nice the way that somebody, you know, that's 7 can sing and they've never had a day of training in their life. Like, that being effortless at something naturally is awesome. But that just wasn't my lot in life, at least not as it applies to filmmaking. But in teaching it, I began to realize, okay, if I can help them get better, can I help myself get better?
That's something interesting you brought up there, which is this piece around teaching something you weren't good at, and being good at teaching it and making an impact on other people. Because there is this bias, and I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I don't know. It depends on the situation, I think. I think that, you know, there's the old saying, those who can't do, teach, right? But I think there are things that, I know there are things I can teach that I teach spectacularly. And I know that the impact of it is immense, but I know I don't do it. I know I'm very poor at it in my own life. And I'm fully willing to own that. But I'm fucking great at telling you what to do. And I can actually see the vision of it very, very well. But, you know, there's that self-application. There are places where that... And I think that there are also people who don't teach very well, who think they're teachers, and also can't do it. That's a different story. But, you know, it's interesting to me that you could teach it, you weren't doing it, and you were having that impact. What was that like? Was that at all sort of disempowering in any way, because this was originally your dream, this was your passion, as I talked about, and then suddenly you're not doing it, you're teaching it?
Actually, so it had the opposite effect on me, and it became very empowering, because what was happening was I took the lessons that I had been learning in film school, I'd primarily focused on the technical side, because, again, I think I'm naturally talented. I don't think it's something that can be taught. But the technical side, I think that, you know, I really understood that I needed to learn that.
Right.
So I come in, I increase my technical proficiency to enhance what I think is this natural talent. Then as I'm going to try and articulate the non-technical side, so really having to go, okay, what is, like, whether it's natural or it's learned, like, what is talent in filmmaking? Like, what makes one person better than another? Why is one scene good and another scene isn't? And so I had to teach myself that at night because I couldn't articulate it during the day. So I realized in that period of my life that teaching is brutally difficult and requires an insane amount of energy outside of the classroom to actually come in and be prepared. But I would go home and I would just research. I would watch scenes. I would read about it. I would read other people's breakdowns. You know, and this is before the internet. So I'm like reading like all these like journals and books and anything I can get my hands on about what makes great directing, working with actors, what makes great writing, breaking down story structure, you know, things that we had touched on in film school, but you're moving so fast that you don't have time to really, really go deep. So I'm going deep on all this stuff. I'm really educating myself. And then I get to put it to the test, not on my own stuff, but on somebody else's, and see if it's real or not. And that like hypothesis, test, result, it was really, really valuable feedback. And that created in me this realization that I can learn this. So it doesn't matter whether I knew it instinctually or not. I could learn it. I could teach it, which is doubling down on my knowledge. And then if I could teach somebody else and improve them, was I actually improving myself as well? And so then went out and, I mean, I'm really condensing a timeline here, but then later went and wrote some feature screenplays. One of them won awards. I made a feature myself that I directed, and then I wrote a screenplay that ended up getting turned into a film. all very, very different experiences, but each one taught me that, whoa, these things that I'm learning actually do apply and have like real world consequences in terms of getting better at something. So that began this feedback loop of you can improve anything. So I started, and like I said, I'm condensing like 5 years worth of realizations here, but I began to realize, okay, so the human is the ultimate adaptation machine. I can direct my attention and focus on something and actually gain skills in that arena through practice, disciplined practice. You can get, good at anything. And that's all what fed into me then ultimately getting into being an entrepreneur. Very
cool. So I want to jump to a mindset thing first, because I want to find out what happened. What was it? How did it do your head in, or did it do your head in, or did it do something else altogether? When you suddenly got this evaluation back on the company that the company with a Quest was suddenly this $1 billion organization. What was that like, in your head?
It seemed inevitable. So by that point, I'd been doing hardcore entrepreneurial stuff by the time that we got that valuation, probably like 13 years.
Right.
So, you can change a lot in 13 years. So I was not that same guy who was like, oh my God, I can learn this. Like the conviction of I can go into any situation is what I call the arrogance of belief. I have the arrogance to believe I can learn anything. I can figure anything out. And I don't think that I come into any situation being better than anybody or knowing more than anybody. I just more relentlessly believe in my ability to figure it out. And then my discipline, which has really become the core of my character. I have the discipline to put the effort in, to stick with it long after anybody else, when it's super boring, when it's exhausting. Like I will just keep going. So by that point, I had worked in the technology industry for almost a decade. I had transitioned over into manufacturing. We had been, by the time we got the valuations, almost 5 years in. So, it's like I've been going at this for a very long time with the singular focus of really adding value to people's lives, building something that matters. And through that process, realizing that with where social media had gone, with the way that millennials and Gen Z had changed, and just the booming change in attitudes around health, that we were making all the right decisions and that it was just inevitable that we get big. I never thought it would happen that fast. That was the only thing that surprised me. But when we launched, we're going to change the face of the food industry to have the kind of impact that because our mission was to end metabolic disease. To do that, it necessitated building one of the biggest companies on the planet. So it was like just all of that belief really did make, when it happened, I was like, yeah, this is.
So there was a deep purpose driving it all.
100. It was the only thing driving it. Yeah. So I had, in technology, all I was doing was chasing money. That was it. I wanted to get rich. That was the thought that woke me up in the morning. It was what kept me awake at night. And I burned out on that and realized that I just wasn't driven by that. So to try and put wealth and dollars at the center of my life just didn't work with my personality. It didn't work with my passions. No. And so I had literally eschewed all of that to generate value, and that changed everything.
So let's come to this piece around discipline, because I think there are some mistakes around discipline, some misunderstandings around discipline. I've been speaking, teaching for 34 years, and I'm constantly bang into people who have things around discipline that, to me, seem to get them stuck. I always say there's no such thing as discipline. There's only the things you make important. Discipline is you make yourself do something, but if you make something important, then you're drawn to do it anyway. And I want to bring it to awareness tech. You had a company called Awareness Tech. You moved to the Philippines to make sure your people were getting trained.
I went to the Philippines, yeah. So that was...
Was that discipline?
So to your point about the discipline in my life is born out of identity, right? So Tony Robbins talks a lot about that. Identity drives behavior, and I'm just a huge, huge, huge believer in that. So yes, all of that. I mean, whether it was flying coach for 17 hours, which was a lot of fun, or just, having the discipline to have built all of that up at the company. And in that company, they hired me as a copywriter. And I went from copywriter to an owner in the company, and just through sweat equity and becoming the chief marketing officer. So all of that was an echo of the discipline, but you're 100% right that the discipline is really an echo of building your identity and making that something that's just not a want, an absolute burning need. So for me to accomplish the things that I wanted in life, to be the person that I want to be, I had to become disciplined, which I am very much not by nature. Going back to my mom. So my mom's always been my biggest champion, but she just knew to the core of her being that I was one of the laziest people she'd ever met. And so when I left for college, she assumed I was going to fail. She didn't say that, but when I asked her years later, because she's always trying to get me to move back home. And I was like, you were the one that pushed me to move to LA. Why? And she said, oh, I always wanted you to chase your dreams, but I just assumed you were going to fail. And I was like, wow, what a gift to get that outside perspective years later when it was no longer scary, to get that outside perspective on what I seemed like at the time. But I think, through identity, you can make the most dramatic changes in your behavior.
So talk to us about that, Tom. What was the shifting point from being somebody who's, quote, like your words, naturally lazy and undisciplined to becoming extremely disciplined? Was there a trigger point? Was there an event? What was it that shifted you to go, okay? And therefore, how does that tie into the identity? Because the identity before is I'm lazy and undisciplined.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is I didn't think of myself as lazy and undisciplined. I didn't have any concrete identity, not once filmmaker was gone.
Right.
Once I lost that and realized I'm not a naturally gifted filmmaker, that was a crisis of identity. And like most amazing things in my life, they've all come from emotional crisis. So what happened, I'm at Awareness Technologies. I have the stated goal of I want to get rich. And so that's my goal, right? And here I am. I find myself one day, I'm arguing my partners who were smarter than I am, and I'm arguing with them. And by the way, I define smart as the ability to process raw data fast. So they could just process raw data more quickly than I am. So I don't make a emotional value judgment on whether they're smarter than me. It's just they process data fast. Right. So they would get to a conclusion much faster than me. And oftentimes I was wrong. They were right, based on what's going to move us towards the goal of getting rich, right? So here I am, I'm in this meeting and I'm arguing with them about my idea. And I realize in real time, in the middle of the argument, I'm arguing with them because I want to be right. And it feels terrible to be wrong all the time. So I keep arguing because I want to be right. And in me, a voice is screaming dude, what are you doing? You know you're wrong. So why are you arguing? And in the end, I convinced them. And then I had this moment of panic where I was like, I just convinced them that I'm right. I know I'm wrong. And if my stated goal is to get rich, what am I doing? Right. Because very clearly I'm acting in accordance with a desire to feel good about myself versus a desire to actually get the goal of being rich. So that started this whole thing where I'm like, what do I actually want? And look, if I just want to feel good about myself, just own it, admit it. But I will structure my life very differently if that's the case. Right. And if that's the case, then what I'm going to do is immediately quit this job, because these guys make me feel badly about myself all the time because they are so much smarter than I. And they're way ahead of me in being an entrepreneur. By the time I met them, they had been entrepreneurs 14 years or something crazy. So I was like, I'm never if I value myself only on my ability to have better answers faster than them, I'm just always going to be behind the 8 ball. So in that moment, I realized, okay, I need to feel good about myself. That clearly is important. It doesn't make sense to stay here and feel like shit every day. I don't know if you're where you come down on swearing, but if I'm going to feel like that every day, this is pretty terrible. So either change what my goal is, or change something else. And what I realized I needed to change was what I built my self-esteem around. Because once I switched my mind away from being smart, being right, and I switched it to being a learner and identifying the right answer faster than other people, and then putting all my energy behind that, then it really became an anti-fragile identity. And that, the Nassim Taleb book, Anti-Fragile, makes clear that something that's resilient, something that's tough, is still ultimately defined by its breaking point. Its breaking point is very far away, but it's still defined by its breaking point. Something that's anti-fragile, on the other hand, is something that the more you attack it, the stronger it gets. And so once I made myself the learner, built my self-esteem around being able to learn, being willing to learn, being able and willing to put in the energy and the time to get good at something, then if somebody were to attack me and say I'm stupid or I'm undereducated or whatever, my only question is, in what way? Because if you can show me where the hole is in my game, then I can get stronger.
Sure.
And that is anti-fragile.
That's very cool. That's very cool. There's something there that's underneath, and I just want to see if I can touch on it and see if it's there. I'm a leadership speaker. I speak on leadership all over the world. I train individuals and leaders, and I work with all those people. And and there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of great stuff out there about leadership. And where mine tends to be different is about authentic leadership, but being real. Not just, it's a new trendy word, authentic. It drives me nuts personally, but that's me. And I talk about, when you say authentic, people say, well, I'm an asshole. I know that about myself, so I'm emotionally intelligent because I know that about myself, and this is me authentically. No, that's not. That's a shitty behavior and a need for you to do some work on yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. But at the same time, you kind of led down a path that I think is very important. I want to see if we're on the same page with this. I'm very much about being a compassionate leader. I talk about being a Yin Yang leader. You don't look much more yang than I do. I look like I've been punched in the face, and I look like I could punch you in the face, but I'm actually very yin. I'm heart-centered, I'm compassion-centered, and I think you've got to have both. You've got to have the strength and the power, but you've also got to have the yin and the nurturance. But on the other side of that, I see the great value. I did a video on this a couple of months ago, and it was called The Beast, and it was called Embrace the Beast. Find your beautiful rage and your warts of war. That's what I talked about. Your beautiful rage and your warts of war. The things that piss you off so that they're non-negotiable in your life. So that then it's not discipline. It's like, I just got to get there. This is what I got to do. And I feel like there was some hint of that you were being nice around. And because we don't know each other. Was that part of it, Tom? Is that part of the force, or is it not you at all?
No, it's interesting. So I use the phrase beauty and rage. And look, I'm a big believer in how much you split that really matters. And so I spent 80% of my time on the beautiful side, thinking about the things that I'm grateful for, the amazing things that I want to bring to this world, the way that I want to serve other people. And then 20% of my time is being deeply pissed off, upset with either myself, a chip on my shoulder about other people, deeply dissatisfied with where I'm at. Like all of that stuff, I think it plays. And so you've got to have, I think in movies a lot. So Star Wars really captured this. You've got the light side, you've got the dark side.
Absolutely.
And I think the dark side serves you in very acute moments of pain. And they've done studies on this where if you want somebody to be able to endure more pain, so usually it's done by making them submerge, say, their arm in a bucket of ice. And if you want to be able to extend the amount of time that they can keep their arm in that, let them express anger. So, and then they can keep it up to 30% more just by getting pissed off, by yelling, by furrowing the brow, by channeling that intensity. So in those acute moments where the beautiful things that I'm trying to do and bring into this world fail me, and it's not enough to keep pushing me forward, and I'm just fucking wiped out or whatever, those are the moments where I turn to rage. I have the chills just thinking about it. Those are the times where I think about the people that want me to fail. I think about the people in life that would laugh if I, fall. And in those moments, I'm not going to give them that satisfaction. And that's ugly, man. That's me pushing against that. That's me fucking pissed. That's me grinding and pushing forward because I will win. I will crush them. I only spend 20% of my time there,
sure.
But it is so powerful. And it's one of those things, it sounds like you really get this. It's one of those things I think people really fail to utilize in their life because they think that they need to always be sunshine and light. And I think that the darkness becomes corrosive at a certain point. And if you just give yourself over to that, it's not a great place to live, but holy hell, will it serve you if you know how to leverage it.
Well, you brought Star Wars up, and I mean, you and I are both into story, and I love story and particularly the hero's journey and all the stories that are written around that. But, and I love that Campbell said, the treasure you seek is in the cave of darkness that you fear to step into. Is that's so profound to us, and the cave is usually our own anger, our own rage. And in Star Wars, Luke is sent into the cave where he confronts the greatest of all darknesses, which he thinks is Darth, pulls the helmet off, it's himself, it's his own darkness. And the moment of transformation is the Emperor is constantly saying, come to the dark side, and give in to the rage, give in to your anger. And he finally does, and it's only in that moment that he actually can flip the other way and go to compassion for his father. And I think that this is the point, and that's why I love what you said about the 20%. You got it. You have to be. The word isn't discipline for me. I think you've got to have enough depth and self-knowledge to know this is the line. And if you don't have that depth, if you haven't done enough self-discovery, you're going to shit the bed on it, and you're going to go into full-blown rage, and it's going to take over your life, and it's going to be the darkness. But I have never met anyone who was truly massively successful. I'm not talking about just wealth, I'm talking about fulfillment, who does not have the power of that rage, who has not tapped into the beast and found that within themselves, the what I call the fuck you moment of saying, that's it, I'm doing it no matter what. I'm sick to death of this. And when I talk about purpose and life purpose and do all this work with companies on purpose, and I say, what's the purpose of your company? And they give me this new age horse shit around ultimate service and innovation. I'm like, come on, that's not it. What pissed you off enough to make you want to start a business? What was it that pissed you off enough to make you want to make a difference? Because when you get past the survival needs of taking care of your family, there's something that enrages you. There's something that infuriates you, whether it's the way Hollywood's treating women, or whether it's, the stuff that's in the news today, or whether it's right-wing stuff, or whatever it is, or the way your mom was treated by your dad, or whatever it was. That stuff is fuel. And I think we forget that. It's so juicy, it's so powerful, but as you say, it cannot run you. You have to have the self-knowledge to know this is where the line is.
Dude, yeah, I love that, man. And you gave me the chills like 3 times as you were walking through the Star Wars stuff. I think you're spot on. Yeah,
I think it's so powerful and so missed. We our modern day heroes are so ultimately black or white, and I love, particularly because I'm a movie freak too, I love movies that blur the lines. One of my favorite films of all time is Syriana.
Wow.
Have you seen Syriana?
Yeah.
Most people miss it. And they said, why do you like Syriana? Because it totally blurs the lines. Here's a suicide bomber who is not a fanatic. He's just trying to feed his family. Here's an Arab prince who's trying to bring in solar energy. You think he's all about oil, but he's not. Here's a CIA guy who you think he's about this, but he's actually about that. I just loved all the blurring of lines because this is the truth of who we are. We think that we are something, and this is one of the things I've talked about so many times, is that we live in a world that we want to sell the world, this is who I am. But what we've got to embrace is that we are diamonds, we are multifaceted. And that for every light there is shadow, for every part of us is multifaceted. So I've often said about myself, you see me in the gym and I'm deadlifting, or I'm leg pressing 1,600 pounds and I'm grunting and I'm sweating and spit's flying everywhere, and you go, what a macho dick. And then you see me with a child, or you see me with my beloved, or you see me with a client, and I'm deeply compassionate and caring, and I have more shoes than my wife, and you go, this guy must be gay. Well, the truth is I am gay, and I am straight, and I am all those things, not sexually, but those are facets of my being, and I think we get away from that. And that's what I've loved about when I was watching your stuff and listening about you, is this filmmaker, because it seems like you've gone full circle, Tom. That's why I was really intrigued. Because you went from filmmaker, storyteller, and I would challenge you to say, I do believe you had innate talent, but it was the desire to tell a story. It was the desire to use narrative to change things. And your model, your vehicle was film initially, but your vehicle became business, and now you've kind of gone full circle with impact theory. Tell us about that.
Excuse me. So you're absolutely right about the power of storytelling. And when I think about the impact that I want to have on the world and what I really want to do, it's not why I started out in filmmaking. When I started out, it was a love of the story. It was the emotional roller coaster. It was wanting to be the one in control of that. I maybe more than most enjoy that emotion. And like I'm saying, when you were telling this Star Wars story in the abstract, it gave me the chills. Like I'm a high responder to that kind of stuff. So that was initially what drew me to it. As I got into deep into studying it, I realized that what I really loved is psychology. And that was just an amazing way to express that, to take people on that journey. So when I got into being an entrepreneur and marketing, I realized this is the same thing. It's the same muscle, like really taking people on that psychological journey, understanding what they want, knowing when to violate it, when to give them exactly what they want. I mean, all of that stuff is just incredibly, incredibly powerful. And when finally I got out of just worrying about money and started focusing on, okay, like the struggle is guaranteed, the money is not. So if the money isn't guaranteed, like what is that thing that I'm going to love doing every day? And that became the driver of Quest, wanting to end metabolic disease, having grown up in a morbidly obese family, watching people struggle profoundly with that. I realized, okay, there's a real chance through storytelling and commerce to really make a change. And so there's a reason that, and a business reason, that we built a studio inside of Quest. We were one of the first companies that had all of our own people focused entirely on content creation, trying to tell a story with the brand, connect with people on an emotional level. And then it got to the point where I realized, okay, it's not enough just to address the concerns of the body. We need to address the concerns of the mind. How am I going to do that? I won't take your time walking through it because it's fairly lengthy, but at least here that I believe, whether I'm right or wrong is irrelevant, I believe that the surest way to impact people at a belief system level, which I think is really all that matters, the only way to effectively hit them at belief system is through narrative. And so that meant that if I was going to directly address the problems of the mind that I see us going through, and you talk about what pissed you off enough where you're starting this company, for me, I've worked in the inner cities a lot. And I will just tell you right now that there are incredible human beings. The next Einstein is in the ghetto somewhere, but we'll never know because he doesn't or she doesn't believe in themselves enough to go educate themselves. Their belief system is so malnourished that they don't think they can go learn these things. So even though they may be incredibly bright, they're not going to do anything. So that winds me up, that people's mindsets are so dictated by the people immediately around them, the school system, their parents, the culture, like all of it it terrifies me. And so I've seen incredible people be consumed by that. So I thought, okay, what's the real way that we can give people an empowering mindset, but at scale? Just that's my own particular bent. I'm not interested in helping one person. That doesn't turn me on. Maybe it should. Judge away. It doesn't. And I need to be impacting millions, hundreds of millions, a billion, like as many people as I can. So I think at scale, the only way to do that is through narrative and companies. And those to me are the two things that make up the very fabric of certainly Western society. Sure. So that's why we're now creating, Impact Theory is meant to be a studio. We're trying to create a studio bigger than Disney. And Disney did something. They started back in the 1930s, and no one has replicated this. So the easiest way to explain it is if I say I'm going to go see a Warner Brothers movie or a Sony movie or a Paramount movie, you don't know anything about it. But if I say I'm going to go see a Disney movie, you already know something about it.
There's a story.
Right. And it's one kind of story told from 1,000 different angles. And because of that, it all feeds into the brand ethos. So Disney means something, and that's never been replicated. So everybody else, it's like all across the map, they tell all different kinds of stories, some empowering, some disempowering, and they just want to sell tickets. So we want to tell one kind of story, and if Disney is the most magical place on earth, we want to be the most empowering place on earth.
Very cool. Very cool. You know, one of the things and there's again two sides to that too, which I love. You know, you talked about telling stories that are empowering, but you also talked about people in the ghetto and the environment, and you know, they could be brilliant people the next Einstein, but they're in the wrong environment and they don't have enough belief. And changing those beliefs is an issue in and of itself, because you can't change the belief of somebody who doesn't believe their belief can change. So the first belief is like, can you change your belief? So that can be a challenge on its own. And environments are so important. I mean, people just have no idea. You know as well as I do. Jim Rohn said you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with. I wrote a doctoral thesis on that, on personal emotional resonance fields. And that a personal emotional resonance field is your thought, your emotion, and your feeling, 3 separate things. And when the 3 things are aligned, it creates a frequency modulation, a resonance, a morphogenetic field, as it's described, that attracts to you more of that. So this is why we see that the challenge is you pull somebody out of the ghetto, you take them to Tom and you put them in Tom's training, you put them around Tom for a while and they come out and they're like, oh yeah, I get it now and I'm really in it and I can do this. And you put them right back in the environment and the environment will shift them back to their default position because what the neurons that fire together wire together. And that neurochemistry is so addictive. And this is one of the things I think people forget. And that's why it was interesting to me that you came out of the nutrition space as well, because by nature, this is one of the things when I look at people who condemn. I live in the nicest part of Vancouver there is. I live right by the water, right downtown. And literally a quarter of a mile walk from me is the worst part of Vancouver. It's the downtown east side. It's rough. And I see people walking, and there was somebody sleeping in the park close by, and somebody out of the building was like pissed off about it. And they were talking to me, and I said, don't you think it's sad? And I said, I think if the guy can find a place to sleep that's dry, it's a good thing. And they're like, well, yeah, maybe he's an addict. And I go, aren't we all? Human beings are addicts. We are all addicted. Some of us are addicted to praise. Some of us are addicted to church. Some of us have more socially acceptable addictions than alcohol or drugs. But we're all addicted. And shifting people out of the addiction is environmentally bound. And that's what I love about what you're saying here, is you've got to also, how do we get them out of the environment, Tom? This is to me is important. Because I know you're doing great stuff, I'm doing great stuff, but how do we get them out of the freaking environment? How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I don't think you do. And so there's a guy named Jeffrey Canada, and his work has haunted me since I came across it. Very, very intelligent black man, grows up in Harlem in the middle of the crack epidemic and decides, I'm going to go to Harvard, I'm going to get educated, I'm going to come back, I'm going to change the education system. Goes in, I forget how long he worked in the education system, but long enough to realize it can't be changed from within. So says to himself, I'm going to give up on adults. And I'm going to focus entirely on the next generation. So rather than trying to unwind all of this, go after the next generation, identified what he believed to be the main predictor of future success, looked at people that grew up in the inner city versus people that grow up in a middle-class family. Why do more people from middle class go on to be successful? And he boils it down to one very, very simple thing. He said it's the number of positive words that a child hears before the age of 5. And I just thought, Jesus, can it really be like that terrifyingly simple? And because there's almost certainly some truth to that, the way that we talk here at Impact Theory is this is a generational problem. And I consider myself a filter. So I'm not trying to change the world. I'm not going after people who are antagonistic. You talked about it. The first belief that has to change is the belief that you can change your beliefs. So I'm not going after people that don't believe it, but I'm trying to, because if you look at where people form their beliefs, their parents, the culture, their friends, the 5 people they spend the most time with, the way to influence them and the culture is through narrative, I believe. And so that's why we're attacking that problem. But I don't, at scale, you can never just pull people out of the ghetto, right? So that's certainly not going to happen in a single generation. And then, I'm not the right guy to answer that question. So maybe somebody out there is working on that. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
The area that I care enough about to dedicate my life is that belief system, the individual person. So we're making content both for adults that self-select. That's why I call myself a filter. They see, for me, the movie The Matrix changed my life. Star Wars had a massive impact on me. So people that see that kind of content and respond, that's who we want to make content for. And then we also incubate mission-based companies that we believe, at the end of the day, so much of the fabric of our society is made up by the companies that we champion, that we support with our dollars. And so we want to help usher in that next era of entrepreneurs that really, they want to do things massively. They want to make a lot of money, but they also want to serve people. And so that's really important for me as an individual, and then also for the company. So those are like, the truth is, we're not going to, eradicate the inner cities. We're not going to pull everybody out at scale. But can we, over generations, fundamentally alter the nature of the problem? I think we can.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we can too. But, it's interesting you brought up the Matrix. I know you're a huge, huge fan of that. And again, I am too. But I think that, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. I think a lot of people miss something in the Matrix. Because people who live in the Matrix are far more comfortable than people who live outside of the Matrix in the movie, right? You're eating this slop, wearing rough clothes and living in what looks like a rusty submarine, and everybody else is walking around having a nice life. And I think that this is something that people miss. There's a saying in psychology. My background is in psychology, but it is before it gets better, it gets much worse. And I think that most people go in their life story, they go, this is painful, it's got to change. This is the impetus to change. I'm going to change. Oh my God, this change is painful. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. I'm going back to the familiar painful. We choose the familiar painful. How is what you're doing with impact theory, how do you think that that's making a dent there?
Well, I don't know that anybody's ever going to be able to make a dent in this is going to be hard as hell, and you've got to be willing to push through that. I think that is the fundamental nature of change, as you were saying. I just think that's really, really true. So the question becomes, can you give people glimpses of what awaits them on the other side? So creating that compelling future. And I think the only reason that people push through that stuff, the only reason that it's worth the time and effort to build the identity that we were talking about earlier, the only reason that people are going to struggle through, whoa, this is really hard. And I'm tempted to go back to the familiar. The only reason to keep pushing through that is you were so fucking excited about something that awaits you on the other side, that vision of who you can become, of what you can accomplish, if you amass those skills, if you push yourself, tapping into the beast, as you said, like all of that stuff is, for the right person, so compelling and so exciting. And this is what I think they do a really good job of highlighting in The Matrix is, I never promised it was going to be easy, only that it's real. And once you're tapped into what's real, now all of a sudden you can really begin to leverage things. You can take advantage of the human ability to adapt, to learn, to grow, to get better, to empower yourself. And once you, to really put specifics around that process you were talking about, the part that sucks, the part that's hard, is to recognize everything's your fault. That your life, the way that it exists, is 100% a result of the choices you've made. Even if you were abused as a child, you've allowed that to continue to be an issue. You can't stop what happened to you. You can't change it. But you can decide right now, today, as a fully functioning adult, what you're going to focus on, what you're going to allow to occupy your mindset. And that, once you realize that you're completely in control, you can make different decisions, have a wildly different outcome, that you have to own all of that, everything that happens to you. That sucks, that's hard, and a lot of people refuse to ever face that. But those that do, now you actually can accomplish the things you want to accomplish. You can become the person you want to become. Whatever your dream is, you can do the hard work and make that a reality. But as long as you're lying to yourself, as long as you're not taking responsibility, as long as it's the result of other things you can't control, then you'll always be a victim.
Well, let's face it, it's a lot easier to be a victim.
You know what's interesting, man? Like, emotionally, I get it. Like, on day one, yes. But like on day 100, it's really not. And when I think to go back to where I was, to no longer take responsibility for the things in my life, to feel like, oh, it's the outside world. That was rad in the beginning, and I get it. When I see people with a fixed mindset, I totally feel for them. It is a protective mechanism.
Of course it is.
Other people. But fuck, man, I would never go back.
No.
And that sense of loss of control is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. When I did that piece on the beast, one of the things I talked about was I'm thankful, deeply grateful to my father, who was a terrible father. He was an asshole. He was completely irresponsible. He was abusive. He did all kinds of horrible things to me. And at the same time, I know that I am strong, and I know that I'm deeply loving and deeply compassionate and deeply empathetic and caring, because he was not. I was on an interview back at 1989, and I was being interviewed. And I was being interviewed, and in the interview, the interviewer said to me, you know, you've traveled the world, you've studied with these great spiritual teachers, which I'd done. I studied different religious philosophies. And they said, who was your greatest spiritual teacher? And I said, my father. And they said, oh, was your father a great spiritual master? I said, no, my father was a spiritual imbecile. And he was emotionally devoid, which made me, it was the catalyst for me to say, there's got to be something deeper than that. And that's the ownership of the blessing. What I say, the blessing is the curse is the blessing. And it all is how you look at it and where you go to from that. What was a moment for you? Because this is, I think, happens for many of us. Mine, I literally fell off a mountain, got smashed to pieces, fell 12 stories while free climbing. That is a moment of the fall. Mine is literal. Some people have another kind of fall. It's a bankruptcy, it's a whatever it might be, a divorce, or, you know. What was yours? What was the turning point for you?
That really was, so thankfully it wasn't a literal fall off of a mountain. And I'm going to answer that in a second. First, I want to address what you're saying about your father. That is so powerful, and I can only imagine your audience has heard you talk about that before. But that mind shift of deciding to frame that in another way is absolutely incredible. So I'm just blown away by that. My own thing is I was chasing money. I wanted to be wealthy. I was giving every ounce of my being to that pursuit, to the point where it was beginning to damage my marriage. I mean, it was all in. It was 7 days a week. It was just, if I wasn't sleeping, I was working. It was crazy town. Mm-hmm. And all of that comes up with me feeling absolutely miserable. I was chasing something that I didn't really care that much about. It was eroding my soul. I did not feel alive. Everything that I did took more energy away from me than it gave to me. It was just absolute misery. And for the first few years in business, it really gave to me, and I was getting better and growing more powerful, and it was awesome. And then it started to take and take and take until I really emotionally was a shell of the person that I, had been years before that. It was so miserable, man. So finally I go into my partners and I say, look, I quit. I can't do this anymore. Here's your equity back. I was planning to move to Greece to go back to writing full time. My wife is Greek, which is why we were going to move there. I was really going to finish learning the language and just only do things that made me feel more alive. I was going to reduce my need for capital to virtually nothing. And that was just going to be it. And I was never again going to do something that wasn't enjoyable in and of itself in the moment. I was going to focus on adding value. I was going to focus on what at the time I called just being myself. I want to be me. I don't want to be a clever marketer. I want to be myself. Right. And that was really, really important, to acknowledge who the person I want to be, the person that I am, all of that, just get into the truth of who that is and the things that I love and the things that I enjoy. And I was trying so hard to be the business guy, the entrepreneur that I thought I was supposed to be, instead of really being who I am and who I want to become. But
you were doing a lot of things to move towards that. What was the point when you suddenly got, this is a fool's errand?
It really was slow, man. I wish it was one moment. It was just day after day feeling worse than the day before. It was realizing, God, I dread Mondays. I live for Fridays. And it's been this way for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. My wife is saying, you're not fun to be around. You're just unhappy all the time. This is sad. She was heartbroken for me to watch me become that. And then she was frustrated that, hey, it's not a lot of fun to be married to somebody who's miserable all the time. Sure. So just realizing okay, look, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So it really just got to where emotionally it was so unbearable over such a long period of time that I just said enough is enough, and that was it. So unfortunately for me, there was no singular moment where I fell off a mountain and could say, okay, dumbass, time to wake up and do something differently and think differently. It was just really slow.
Well, the reason I ask you is I believe that everybody goes through a fall. But I think the misconception, and it's often put in place by movies, is this part about movies I don't like, is that the event happens and that's the turning point. That's never the turning point. It's not when it happens. People say to me, must have changed your life when you fell off a mountain. No, it didn't. I became more arrogant. When people said to me, how you doing? I'm good, I'm great, I'm coming back. It was the same shit all the time. And it wasn't until about 9 months later, when my cat died, a cat I didn't even like died, and I picked up this cat and I'm bawling my eyes out and fall on the floor in the fetal position and weep that I realized my life is fucked. What the hell am I doing? I'm trying to get back to something that was not fulfilling me. So it's I always say there's a, and this is my language around it. There is the pivotal moment. I fall off a mountain, get smashed to pieces. I'm hospitalized and all that. That's pivotal. But that's not where the power is. The power is in the choice moment when everything can become normal again. And you must choose, do you go back to what was normal? Do you go back to what was usual? Or do you go to something else? And that moment for me was the changing point. That's why I always ask people, because I want to know if you recognize it, was there a moment or was it actually after? So it's interesting. And I think that your wife saying, listen, you're a miserable bastard and it's not much fun being around you, that's an important factor. As we're getting close to the end, I want to ask you, what is it that scares you? What is it that keeps you up at night? Because I think that all of us who are driven have that. What is it for you?
It's interesting. So my answer isn't going to be, I don't think, what you're expecting. And there's only two things that I'm afraid of, and that's losing my wife and brain damage. Brain damage because I really do believe I can learn anything. I can come back from anything. So if I woke up tomorrow and I lost everything financially, before I had success, I had to do all the work to come to grips emotionally with gratitude, feeling alive, like being energized by things, and that doesn't come from money. So that, like, while I don't eagerly rush towards losing what I've built, that doesn't scare me. But brain damage, because there's no coming back from that, at least not as of today, that fucking terrifies me.
Sure. And
my wife, I've allowed myself to invest emotionally to a level that I've never done with another human being, and now over such a long period of time. And for me, the thing that I prize most in my relationship with my wife is shared experience. So we've been sharing a life for 17 years, and the only way to build that back is real time. So that is scary. Those two things freak me out.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool, actually. I feel the same way about my bride. 20 years, and just I'm more in love with her than the day I married her. And the greatest decision I ever made, I've made some shitty ones, I've made some good ones, but the best one I ever made was asking her to marry me. And the greatest gift was she said yes. And every day, every night, every morning, I say thank you to her, not just to myself, to her. And so I totally get where you're coming from. And when people ask us our secret, I say, divorce is always an option. And they go, wow, I would have thought you would have said something very opposite to that. I go, no, it's always an option for her. She has the same feeling. It's always an option for me. But what it means is I can't take it for granted. What it means is I got to step up my game. I can't. So I totally get where you're coming from. That's pretty beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Tom. I appreciate it. Listen, what's if you could say one piece of advice that you want leaders, people in leadership positions, whether entrepreneurs, CEOs, C-suite, whatever they might be, one piece of practical advice from what we've talked about today, which I've loved, what would that be?
What you build your self-esteem around matters. Like, that was really my biggest breakthrough. Once I shifted my identity, my self-esteem to being the learner, literally everything changed. I think especially for leaders, that's huge because it opens the door for other people to bring the full weight of their talents and personality, because they're not worried about offending you. It's not about your ideas. It's really about letting the team shine, letting other people get really good at something, being able to delegate. All of those things, I think, are echoes of a deep sense of security with who you are. And when that deep sense of security comes from, oh, I'm better than everybody, they feel that. And if instead it comes from, man, I want to learn, I want to get better, that will become baked into the culture in a way that's just insanely empowering for the whole organization as well as for the individual.
Fabulous. Mate, this has been really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate it. I know you don't take all of the interviews that you get offered, and I really appreciate you being on this one. Please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, about Impact Theory, about all the things that you do and all the things that you offer.
Definitely. At Tom Bilyeu across everything. So YouTube /Tom Bilyeu, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of it at Tom Bilyeu. Unfortunately for me, my name is spelled a little bit weird. It's B as in Bravo, I-L-Y-E-U.
What is the heritage?
French. But I have like the world's tiniest amount of French, but somehow the name is stuck. But yeah. So there it is.
You're the least French person. Okay, that's good. Well, we'll make sure that gets up on the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Tom. You'll stay with us to the end. I want to thank you, dear listener, dear viewer, for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I have today. I appreciate Tom coming on and really just delivering and just opening right up, and we got right in there. And listen, I say this to you every single time. Don't listen to the show. Don't watch the show. Who gives a shit if you've got it running in the background? It doesn't do anything. Stop. Pay attention. Take out a pen. Take out a paper. A physical pen on physical paper and write notes and listen and think about what you can apply. Because unless you do something with it, it's worth the hole in the donut. Information is worth the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from application. So go back and listen to it. And remember, if you're in business, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive. The fastest companies are doing what it takes to get to the top, and they're attracting amazing employees, but they're having great challenges in keeping them, and they're often leaving them before they have a chance to really have that ROI. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent, only to have them leave you before you get the return on investment, reach out to us and talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into your purpose. Full Monty Leadership, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, fullmontyleadership.com, saying stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about where you are invested in getting your self-esteem from. Till next time, Dov Baron, I'm out.